Good morning. It's Lisa with Lisa Heal Yourself. And today we're kind of going to talk about the State of the Union last night in the United States. I want to start by saying I'm Canadian and I'm certainly not political, and I certainly don't want to, talk about any of the geopolitical stuff going on in the world. But I do want to talk about it from a health perspective because, you know, on this channel, I see a lot of people who've been injured, who are severely sick, who are severely ill, who need help. And, you know, we need to focus on each individual who's sick and getting them better. But at the same time, it's important. We need to see what's going on in the world. We need to see, you know, what is causing these illnesses at the root. What can we do to solve them from a bigger perspective, and how can we take our own power back and heal ourselves naturally as well? So it's important that you know that we are keeping our eye on what's going on in the world and not just so focused on healing ourselves, although that is the main focus. There's been so much going on in the world, hasn't there? It's hard to keep up. The last 2 years have really been eye-opening and a blur. They've been discouraging. um, they've brought a lot more questions up than they have answers. And so last night when I was watching the State of the Union, and let me just preface this by saying I love the United States of America. I'm Canadian. I am a true Canadian patriot, but I love the USA. I grew up going there every year. We'd go down to Florida. I mean, I love going there. I've lived there. I've lived out in Seattle. My son was born there. So I love the United States of America. And in Canada, we think of the United States, and maybe I'm only speaking for myself, as kind of our cooler, bigger, more flashier neighbor, right? The cool kid on campus. And they're very flashy, strong, good looking, and in Canada, we're the neighbor. We're more the girl next door. We're more the kid next door. We're more, a little bit more quiet. We're not out there in your face. We're still a good person, but we're great neighbors, right? We stand up for each other. And the United States always has Canada's back, and we love to go back and forth, go over and go shopping, come back. I mean, this is a relationship where we love our American neighbors and we care what happens to them. And what happens to them usually happens to us here in Canada. We usually follow our good older, brother or our neighbors, the cool kid on campus, the cool kid, the strong, you know, um, athlete of the year. We usually, follow the lead. Not always. We're a strong country. I mean, we know our right from wrong. We have our own values, but we usually follow our neighbor. And so that scares me watching the State of the Union, because often what gets passed through and what happens in the United States often trickles down, um, and we adopt it here in Canada. And not always, but that's often the case. So it's often an indication for us Canadians as to what's coming, what we could maybe expect. And we look to our freedom loving, amazing brothers in the United States, brothers and sisters, and um, we learn from them. We grow with them. And so this State of the Union was, in my opinion, just a disaster last night and really hard to watch. So I'm looking at this man, and I'm not being ageist. I am not criticizing him for being in his 80s. Okay, but let's look at this. I'm not sure exactly his age, but let's look at this man, 80. Let's look at his age, right? Let's look at Nancy Pelosi. Let's look at her age, right? These are people who are grandpas, they're grandmas, and they're heading into the last phase of their life. And I'm looking at him reading the speech. This speech doesn't come from his heart. The speech comes from speechwriters. And so none of it was his, none of it was his own. He stumbled through a few words, slurred a few words. It wasn't really energetic or believable in any sense. I mean, he was reading, there was no heart in the speech. He's reading from it. We're divided. I mean, Americans, Canadians, communities, families, we're more divided now than we ever have been in our life. And so I found it tough to rally behind him, not only because I don't agree with most of his policies, but just I found it hard to rally behind him in general. Just looking at this older gentleman behind the podium and thinking, is this the best we can do? And this is the greatest country on earth, one of the greatest countries on earth, United States of America. Is this the best and the brightest mind from all across the world? I mean, really just think about all the people in the United States who are bright political minds and lawyers, and just that they've been to school and they're educated and they're amazing speakers and they can rally confidence and support, and they really have heart and passion and their values come out, and they're young enough to still care, to still have this integrity, and these values come through and hear it in their speech and have ideas and want to change the world and be young enough to take it on and have enough heart and courage and conviction to address a divided, tired, really unsure nation. And that didn't happen last night. And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, is this the best we got? Is this really it? He is representing all of the United States of America with all those bright minds out there, and this is the best we can do? Just reading, disheartening, dispassionate from a speech, none of his own words, probably none of his own convictions. He's been in politics so long. And it shows, right? Politics sucks the life out of people often. And it shows. There's a lot of jockeying for position. There's a lot of, I mean, your job in politics is for political gain and financial gain and power. That's the job, right? And he's been at it a long time. And you can tell that he's tainted and tarnished and worn out from it. And you can tell that there's not much left in there. There's not much left that can unite this country the way it's divided. And, he spent most of the talk talking about the war, most of his speech addressing the war. He talked about a lot of his other policies that I'm not going to get into. There was a lot of patting himself on the back, a lot of everybody standing up and applauding, and it just looked so scripted and hard to believe, right? We're sitting here at home as Canadians, as Americans, watching this, thinking, none of this is relevant. You have spent the last year in office. The whole presidency so far has been about COVID. It's been about the pandemic. It's been about these vaccines. And he literally talked for 5 minutes, maybe less. His whole speech had to do with COVID. Which, he gave his speech earlier, just before Christmas, saying this is going to be the winter of death and dying, and the unvaccinated are to blame, and they're all going to die this winter. That was a horrible, horrible speech. And, he really laid into everybody, and he painted this excruciating picture. And never once did he come back and address that. Like, it wasn't the winter of death and dying and destruction and disease. And, let's go back and look at some of these things that this administration has lied to you about over the last year, has misinformed you. There's been so much talk about misinformation, but there was no accountability in that speech. There was no talk of any of the vaccine injuries, of any of the vaccine deaths, of any of the origins of, where COVID came from. There's just been no acknowledgement of any of the studies coming out, of all of the stuff coming forward that shows otherwise, that shows these are not quite safe and effective, as they would say. I mean, today, March 1st, or yesterday, March 1st, we're going to start to see the first batch of the data that they've withheld, that the court ordered them to finally give the world. And we're going to see this COVID data starting to come out now. So we're going to see, what's happening. We're already seeing so much evidence coming to the forefront of injuries and hiding information and hiding evidence and injuries, deaths, problems, complications. We're going to see it all starting to come out. And I think this administration, knows it's coming, trying to turn away from COVID, spent less than 5 minutes discussing it and really giving the appearance that they've moved on from it. Which, in light of everything coming down the pipe and in light of the first batch of real evidence that we have coming out from the CDC, isn't surprising. It also isn't surprising that Biden's approval ratings are in the tank. They're at an all-time low. He has no confidence from his people. And, he's continually divided Americans. And in turn, we've been divided here in Canada. So divided, like really going after misinformation, really going after unvaccinated people, really going after, dividing people. He didn't take accountability for all the people he put out of work, fired, all the jobs lost, all the small businesses gone under, all the really dire things that have happened under his administration. There's just a lot of weird pat on the backs and trying to just ignore all of that, So, okay, so let's talk about health for a minute, because that's what really matters here on this channel. So in his speech last night, the things that really worried me were the fact that he didn't back down on his vaccination policies. He held them firmly in place and said, basically, will not rest until we get the world vaccinated. Took, a pretty hard stance on that. He took his similar stance that he has been taking, which is worrying because the rest of the world is opening up. Places are starting to not use the vax passes anymore. I mean, a lot of things are going, the evidence is going in the opposite direction. So the fact that they're still hanging on to this, it's a financial decision like it has been all along. But this financial decision is not only, it's not a harmless decision. He is still got the USA under a state of emergency. So they're ushering these vaccines in under a state of emergency, which gives the vaccine, which gives Pfizer, Moderna, which gives the vaccine companies a liability shield to basically move forward at warp speed with these vaccinations and vaccinate everybody regardless of the side effects, because they have immunity against any side effects or harm or damages that it causes under the state of emergency. Now, looking at that speech last night, there is no state of emergency, right? I mean, he spent the entire time talking about a war. Now, that might be a state of emergency, right? But this was not. I mean, I'm going to take a breath because I have a lot of feelings and a lot of emotions about this, but because his approval ratings have been so tanked and because the evidence is really going against him right now, him and his whole administration and everybody in that room were maskless. Did you notice? They all had their masks off. And I find it convenient that the science came in on this a day before his State of the Union address. Just suddenly the science is in and they're no longer needed. Now, obviously that was a politically driven decision last night not to wear the masks, and was due to his approval rating and was due to mounting pressure around the world to look at the real evidence here. And so, I find it interesting that this evidence just magically came in and his administration decided that the science is now showing that you don't need a mask. And, even a couple of weeks prior, had anyone suggested it, that you didn't need a mask or that the evidence wasn't supporting that, your videos would have been censored. You would have been taken offline. You would have been called horrible names. I mean, really the division that he's created. And so I find it, the hypocrisy, if you will, really just hard to take last night. when they were all standing there, maskless. And the thing that should really be hard for, I would say, most baby boomers, especially, who are sitting in front of, CNN, reading the New York Times, and in Canada, CBC and CTV, and all the mainstream media outlets who have been, condemning anyone who would not wear a mask or suggest that you not wear a mask or not get vaccinated or anything like this. I wonder what these people thought last night when all of them were standing there unmasked. And at the end of the speech, the thing that really was like hard to even imagine happened was, if you watch the footage after he said his final words on the State of the Union and he went out to shake hands amongst everybody there. He literally shook like 200 to 300 hands, leaning in, hugging, kissing, whispering in ears, like this far from people's mouths, their mouths. There was no social distancing at all. There wasn't even a whiff or a sniff of it, right? If you watch that part, even watch 5 to 10 minutes of that, if anybody, any of the baby boomers have been glued to the television and glued to our leaders' every words about these masks and how important they are and social distancing and the refusal to look at any of the science that shows that they weren't working. I mean, to see them take them all off and to see Biden going around shaking everyone's hand, leaning in, whispering in their ears, face to face, nose to nose, kissing, hugging. I mean, there was not a whiff of social distancing or a whiff of fear of spreading or transmitting or catching COVID last night. And that, for them to be able to turn on a dime like that after condemning so many of us who have been questioning this all along should be eye-opening to the people who bought it hook, line, and sinker. Should be eye-opening to the people, still sitting at home in their masks and sending their kids to school in their masks and not seeing their dying loved ones in nursing homes and not seeing their family anymore at Easter and Christmas and Thanksgiving and all these events, and being scared. And watching him last night, watching Joe Biden last night, just whispering in mouths and saliva and everything going back and forth, and these hugs and handshakes and not a whiff of it. And he just turned it like that, right? Just like that. And so everyone at home, really, it's like, it's almost would be hard for his supporters to be like, what is going on? What is actually going on here? I watched him in awe, sitting here thinking, you barely mentioned COVID in your speech. And now this was more interesting to me than the actual speech. Watching him go around for the 10 or 15 minutes that they aired afterwards, And if you didn't see it on the news, go watch a live stream, go pick it up, go watch it, go watch the cameras after and watch what's happening. And sit in amazement after everything that you've been told and everything that you've done to comply, and the way you still are, and just sit in amazement over what's happening and how quickly they can change a narrative if it works for their benefit, if it works for their approval ratings. Just look at how quickly we can turn on a dime. So that should be concerning to a lot of people who are still at home afraid and wearing masks, and just watching the narrative turn just like that, just the day before the speech, and just when the approval ratings are at an all-time low, and just when the science is coming out, and just, all of this stuff. It was convenient. It was convenient timing, wasn't it? And it was hard to watch. It was hard to stomach after everything he's been saying and how hard he's been coming down on anyone who dared not wear a mask. It was hard. It was hard to stomach. I found it incredibly difficult to stomach. And so, these are our leaders. These are the ones, this is the person we're looking to pull us out of this 2-year pandemic mess. And we can see how quickly they can shift it and change and lie and hide. But you notice they kept the vaccine policy in place. He was a hard, he won't rest until everyone across the world is vaccinated. And we know, we can see, I mean, just the hypocrisy and the dichotomy of what was happening, and the masks off and the hugging and the kissing and the whole eye-opening thing that we witnessed, like that we just witnessed with our mouths agape, but at the same time him saying that he won't rest until everyone's vaccinated. And we know everyone who's vaccinated is getting Omicron, right? And we know that these vaccines are only working, they only have efficacy for 3-6 months. So why are we, now that Omicron has swept through, now that it's not killing everybody, now that we have the evidence, now that we have the details, now that they're even unmasking, why are we going after kids? Why are we going after the children? Why are we putting this in place? And we know that it's a financial decision, and we know that they have to get the kids on this vaccine schedule. And when they do, they can end the state of emergency. They can keep the liability for the vaccine manufacturers in place once the kids are on this schedule, because vaccines were already given this immunity back in the 80s. So that law went through, and now it's vaccines that are able to do this, but only under the childhood schedule. So this is, I mean, it's hard to watch because this evidence is going to come out, and it's going to be too late for almost everybody. And that makes me sick to my stomach as somebody who cares deeply about health, who cares deeply about diseases and autoimmune diseases and cancer and the rates of everything else that are going up simply because of this. Now, don't get this as medical misinformation, right? This could be conspiracy theory. It could be misinformation. I'm not giving you medical advice here. I'm not even saying what's true or what's not true, but we're going to be seeing the evidence clearly coming out. Of course, they're redacting this evidence heavily. So you're getting sheets of paper that are so heavily redacted, it's going to be almost impossible to tell what is what. But we see the evidence. We see the people. We see the documentaries coming out. We see the actual people who are injured and have died. And we see the information that was suppressed and hidden. And we see all this coming out now. And so we have to look at this. We all have to look at this. And, we have to continue to stand for freedom, for personal freedom, for informed consent, for our own personal medical decisions and choices, and for this division to stop attacking people or shaming people or criticizing people or not allowing them to participate in society for making their own medical decisions, especially in light of all the evidence that has come out and that will continue to come out over the next 8 months as all this data is made available. So they might want to turn the page on this. It's obvious that they do, and their focus is the war. And again, I'm not going to talk about the war. I mean, it's terrible. Anytime we go to war, it's bad. Anytime people die, it's bad. So I'm against all war, right? I think that we can handle things with our words, and we don't need to resort to violence. And Russia invading Ukraine is horrifying, and the US invading Iraq was horrifying. So nobody wins in war. Nobody wins in war, except for the manufacturers of all the arms and all the people who are financially winning from a war. But the citizens, the civilians, none of them win from war. So, he wants to turn his attention to the war that's only less than a week old and ignore all the failures over the last year and sweep COVID under the rug and, give a rah-rah, no facts, no numbers, no data, just we must vaccinate everybody, just point blank, stand behind it, no data to support it, basically just a statement so that he can rally support for this and continue the financial windfall, really, that these vaccines, that's who wins, right? The people who win financially are the people who win. And the people who are hurt, the people who have suffered over the last 2 years, And the people who are still in their masks as they're out hugging everyone. I mean, that's what's hurt. And just, it's easy to get people to comply when you put them in fear. It's easy to get people to comply when you own the media, when you own the mainstream media, when you buy them off, when you tell them what to report, when you use propaganda, and when you tell a narrative on what you want, right? So hopefully more people are going to be waking up. Hopefully more people are going to be seeing. Hopefully the data is going to continue to come out. Hopefully the truth will rise. And hopefully, I mean, I was excited, partly excited to see masks coming down, to see vax passes being ended in certain provinces in Canada and, certain places in the USA. And, these are all good signs because they obviously need to happen. But yet, it must be troubling to those who, we've listened to the messages, we've heard the fear, we have trusted, we have believed you, and now in a dime you're going to turn and expect us that we're supposed to be not confused after you give less than a 5-minute exclamation. I mean, it was troubling to me to watch. It was disheartening for me to watch just this old man thinking like, we can do better than this. This isn't the best and the brightest that we have to offer. And Americans deserve better. Canadians deserve better. And just these speeches that they give, that they don't even write, that don't come from the heart, that we can see clearly they don't even believe, that they're just out there saying in order to propel a narrative forward, to win political gain, to get financial gain, for more control. I mean, we're able to start to see through some of this stuff. And medically speaking, health-wise, that speech wasn't great for me, right? That speech wasn't great for me, even though the masks were off. That speech wasn't great for me because the masks aside, the lockdowns aside, yeah, sure, those aren't the things that could truly harm someone. It's the vaccines, and really that stance, that's the one I'd like to see ended. I would like to see these passes gone. I would like to see people having their own choice on that. That's really the one that matters, your own sovereignty, your own personal choice for what you put in your body that could have serious, lasting, long-term consequences. So that was the one thing that I wanted to see, and that was the one thing we didn't get. So we're getting a whole lot of smoke and mirrors, but we're not getting the heart of it. So we have to stay on this. We have to continue to stand up for freedom, stand up for personal liberties. Whether you're in the US or you're in Canada, write to your congressman, write to your senators, write to your MPs, write to those in power, and continue to express that they end the mandates, that they give back people their personal freedoms and powers, which we need if we want to continue to live in a free society and we want our children to grow up truly in a free world. So I wasn't inspired last night by that speech. Didn't make me feel any better. Made me worry more about the war. It made me more worried about nuclear threat. I didn't like the way that they swept COVID under the rug and have left really Americans, Canadians, people around the world holding the bag, not understanding what the truth is, not being able to see the real data, not being able to see what's happening, feeling more divided than ever, not knowing how to heal that, being scared to move forward, unsure to move forward. Are we allowed to move forward? Should we be scared to take off the masks? Are we going to be in trouble if we take off the masks? Can we talk about it? Can we not talk about it? I mean, I feel the world is more divided than ever, and I think it's up to all of us to continue to spread truth, spread love, spread unity, be unified, right? We have to do the work. It's clear that the people need to put the power in their own hands to do the research, to do the work, to see the evidence, to stop buying into a government narrative that really has got us nowhere and is continuing, unfortunately, as we saw last night, to divide. So that's it for me, wrapping up the State of the Union last night from President Biden and just where we stand medically. I think we all need to start writing to those in power. I think we need to keep the pressure on to end these mandates. And I think we absolutely need to restore freedom to each individual to make their own health decisions and have true informed consent, and have the pharmaceutical companies be liable for damages and injuries and harm that they cause. It's the only way, it's the only true way forward and out of this, in my opinion. So I hope you've liked this video. I'm sorry it was a little down today. It's just, we go from one fear to another fear, and we're all exhausted. And now we're worried about being on the brink of a nuclear war. So let's remember, these are the people who have lied to us for the last year, the media's lied to us. It is hard to know who and what to trust anymore. Spread love, spread truth, spread freedom. Love yourself and love others. That's all we can do. That's all we can do moving forward. Okay, see you in the next video.